Hi, welcome to the third video this week, episode 3 of From the Stewards Room. Again, the premise, if you're watching for the first time, I find it really useful to read through the stewards reports that are published on the BHA website each evening. Sometimes you just get a clue as to why your selection ran badly or why a horse that you'd perhaps discounted as a contender had run above themselves. And a myriad of other things as well. Just anything that connections feel is important to report to the stewards, they should do so, and that gets logged and can just inform your opinion of a horse going forwards. Start with the 24th of October, the Exeter 4 o'clock. And actually this was asked about on Twitter by DanWalk87, who just questioned why two riders had received a day suspension for an infringement down at the start. So I'll just read you the entry as it appears in the BHA Stewards report. The starter reported that the following riders had not approached the tape at a walk or a jig jog. So a jig jog is a sort of steady trot because it's very difficult to expect a horse to walk when it's tuned up to run. Sean Bowen, the rider of Exmoor Forest, and Conor Brace, the rider of AJP Kingdom. The riders and starters were interviewed and recordings of the incident were shown. For being found in breach of misconduct at the start, Bowen and Brace each received a one-day suspension. I've spoken to a few jockeys about this, and sort of general consensus is that the starter will have a quiet word with you and tell you that you're pushing your luck, and perhaps if you choose to ignore him, that's perhaps why the one-day suspension has come. But if you watch the race back, it's very clear that Conor in particular is in a canter and his hands are resting on AJP Kingdom's neck. He's not doing an awful lot about trying to rein the horse back to a trot or a jig jog. And both those horses were ridden prominently, so it's clear that they wanted a good start and wanted to get a position, and they just slightly stepped over the line in terms of what's deemed appropriate. So that's why they got a day suspension. That also occurred at Cheltenham on the Saturday for the amateur rider handicap chase, and a number of amateurs there got a one-day suspension, and there was a couple actually from Ireland that got a 2-day suspension because it was their second such infringement within 12 months. Moving on to Carlisle on the 26th of October, and again this is one that I mentioned last week, a similar entry, and it was Anti-Bridgie. The connections reported they were unable to fit the tongue tie, and permission was given to run without the declared tongue tie. Now this is quite interesting because Anti-Bridgie actually finished third, but got to the front at Carlisle after the last, just about got to the front up the run-in, and then weakened and eventually finished third. Has had a tongue tie fitted before, so it's not that they absolutely won't be able to get a tongue tie on in the future, whether they'll try, because obviously if you're trying to get a tongue tie on and the horse doesn't want it, that's a fairly unhappy episode for the poor trainer trying to fit it, but also for the horse, and that can have a negative effect on how a horse runs. We often hear that they get stressed, and paddock watchers will quite often say that A or B look particularly relaxed. Well, if you're stressing the horse out trying to fit a tongue tie, that might not be ideal. But he has had a tongue tie on before, so it's not that it can't happen. And you just wonder whether that tongue tie missing might just have been that 1% difference between winning and finishing third as they did. So that's certainly one I would watch out for again, and I'd be trying to ascertain whether the tongue tie had been fitted, and might just be a horse that you wait until they're down at the start before backing. Moving on to Cheltenham then on the 25th. And the stewards considered the performance of Lord Accord, who was actually my SBK betting podcast selection for this race. It's no secret this horse needs good ground, and Neil Mulholland confirmed to the stewards that he was unsuited by the ground, which was described as good to soft in places, and would prefer a faster surface. Now that would perhaps suggest that they think that the ground was riding more on the soft side of good to soft than the good side, and I think that was borne out by some of the finishing efforts horses. They looked to get a bit tired, and certainly good ground horses didn't seem to be well served on the Saturday. And also Rachel Blackmore, and I'd missed this in the race, reported to stewards that her saddle had slipped on Am I Right, who travelled well for much of the race and did finish a bit tamely. Rachel's so good, it's hard to see that the saddle has slipped, but whether that just affected her being able to really get hold of the horse and sort of drive him for for full effect might just mean that he's worth considering next time, because I must admit I slightly sort of put a line through him and thought he was maybe a bit of one to avoid, that's perhaps a bit tripless and maybe a bit soft. So maybe he'd be worth considering one more time. And then also on Saturday at Kelso in the 129, Rapper, who weakened drastically going out onto the second circuit, was pulled up very early on. It was reported that he had an irregular heartbeat. And then the same on the 31st at Chepstow, poor Henry Daly with a second one. The trainer Henry Daly reported that Ultra Beat, who was pulled up, stopped very quickly. But the vet was able to shed some light on that and reported that Gelding had an irregular heartbeat. And on top of that, poor old Ultra Beat had also been struck into on his right hind. So he is no doubt going to need a little bit of time on the sidelines, but a perfectly legitimate reason for that below par run on the 31st at Chepstow. So nice short video. No point in pulling up things that don't need to be pulled up, but a couple there that I think are interesting. Hopefully I answered your question, Dan Wok87, and anyone else got any questions? If you've seen anything in the Stewards that I've missed, or if you think you've seen something that the Stewards have missed, do flag it up, let me know, and we'll have a look at it next week. As ever, do hit a like and a subscribe on these videos, share them to your friends. I might be back later this week with an anti-post look at the Grand Sefton Chase, but if not, I'll be back next Monday with the Monday Breakfast Review. Enjoy the rest of the week and see you soon.